What's up everybody, welcome to Shark Vlog. It's Tendo. Today we're gonna have a bit of a hybrid video. We're both talking about video games as well as thrifting. Now wait, before you hit that next button, if you've happened across this video and you're not at all into video games, but you are into thrifting, please stick around anyways, because these tips that I'm about to give for thrifting video games, they will apply to pretty much anything that you could go thrifting for. If you're into thrifting at all, listen to this, it'll still help. So let's get right into it. So the first thing you need to know is that this information that I'm about to give you is going to scale with the size of town that you're thrifting in. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, huge town, thrift stores on every corner, more Goodwills in this one city than I've ever been to in my life in the entirety of the United States. And I'm someone who travels a lot and I go thrifting anywhere I go. There are so many thrift stores here. So that's going to make things a lot different for me opposed to someone who might be watching this who lives in a town of 100,000 people with much less thrift stores than I have access to. So just keep that in mind and try to kind of consider that as I give you some of these tips. So the first tip that I have is to get to know your local thrift stores. It seems obvious, but I'm going to go a little deeper. What you want to do is make sure to ask somebody or look around at maybe the literature that they have that they hand out, or perhaps some information that the thrift stores might have on the wall, because what there is at almost every thrift store chain I've ever been to is sales days. Case in point, the Goodwills here in my town on Thursdays, they have certain colored tags marked down to half off, and every other Saturday of the month everything in the store is half off, and then a certain day of the week a certain color tag is just $1. Every other day at my Goodwills there is a sale. Now that's not necessarily going to be the case at the Goodwills where you are or the other thrift stores that you shop at, but it is just of the utmost importance that you figure out what the sales days are, because I get probably half of what you see here at sales days, and more importantly I get the other half the day before the sales days, because what I've done is I've figured out exactly when they restock their shelves at my local thrift stores prior to the sales days, and I go get that really good stuff that you're more apt to pay a few bucks for, that you don't want to wait to half off and chance someone else getting it. And that's really how I get lucky most often. So there's a tip right there that you definitely need to write down. Figure out the schedule of the thrift stores that you can frequent, the ones closest to your house. Figure out what they're doing, frequent them enough to figure out when they're putting stuff on the shelves, and go then. So my next tip is probably another one that's a little bit obvious, but if you need to hear it, you need to look for other thrift stores. If you're in a big city especially, because I've been living here in Phoenix for a few years now, and I have just in the last few months stumbled across another chain of thrift stores that I had no idea existed, and it has very quickly become my favorite thrift store. It has become one that I always find stuff that I'm looking for. The video games that are there are always amazing. Probably half of my GameCube collection is from there, because there's just always GameCube games there. Now I honestly don't know if it's because a lot of the towns like me, they know what Goodwill is, they go to Goodwills, and they don't know what this other chain of thrift stores is. So just get on Google the name of your city, and Google thrift stores, and just read every one of the articles or every one of the listings on the top few pages on Google, and find them. Find what they are and go to them. Now, you're just as likely to find some thrift stores that you're not going to frequent. There are several chains of thrift stores here in Phoenix that I have been to. I've checked them out, and I probably won't ever go back, because they're just, there's thrift stores that just sell stuff to old grannies, it seems like. And so there's also kind of ones in the middle that I will stop by them if they're on the way to other ones, but I don't really go out of my way to go to them. So that's the next tip. Try to find the thrift stores you don't know about, because you never know which one's going to have that pile of video games that you're looking for. So the next thing I have written in my notes is to be patient. And as I'm sitting here reading my notes on what I was going to talk about in this video, each point does seem a little bit more obvious than the last, but I don't think they're all as obvious as they seem, and this is one of them. Because yes, you need to be patient when you're thrifting for video games, and you need to check that the discs are inside, right? That's the obvious part. But something that I have learned over time is to not just rush into each store just to get to the next one and go. You need to go into a thrift store if you're looking for video games and look everywhere, right? Because you're going to look through the DVD section and you're going to find video games tucked in the DVDs and not over with the video games, if that's even how your thrift stores organize them. I've, of course, been in thrift stores that just mix anything that's a DVD, CD case all together, and you just got to pick through. Sometimes they're nice enough to set the games here, the DVDs here, the CDs here, but you got to have patience, because I bet half of my PlayStation 1 collection was, of course, found in the regular CD section, because no one at the thrift store is going to take the time to pull those PlayStation 1 games out of the CD stacks, because they're in regular jewel cases, and put them over with the video games. So you got to have patience there. But once more, another thing that you're probably not going to think about is how often stuff in a thrift store just gets moved around. I make a lap around any thrift store I go in. I go through the linens, I walk through the toys, I walk down almost every aisle, or at least past every aisle, and I just kind of eyeball it. Because you can go to the electronics, and very often someone will just have thrown down some video games, looking at the other electronics, and decided they're not going to get those. So you've just got to have the patience to look around the store. You're going to find lots of extra little goodies that someone has misplaced. It is going to happen. If you go to thrift stores as much as I do, you will regularly have good finds if you just have the patience to check the whole store. And of course, part of being patient is checking the game disc and making sure that it's not only in good condition, but that it's the right one. I've been bamboozled a few times, not a ton, but sometimes you kind of know what a game roughly looks like, so you open the disc, you see a disc in there, and you close it back. Just the other day, I bought what I thought was a Sonic game, but it wasn't a blue Sonic game, it was a blue Wii Fit game. So that will happen. Don't let it happen to you. Take the time. And that's pretty much it on patience. The next thing, I've got a note scribbled down. Invest in a lot of Goo Gone. Every Goodwill I've ever been to puts those annoying little stickers on the cases. And if you're lucky and you get the games as soon as they're put out, you get them fresh, those stickers tend to peel right off, at least the ones where I'm at. There could be completely different stickers where you're at. But the ones that have been on there for a long time, they get baked on there. And there's really no way to get them off except for Goo Gone. So get used to that. I'm going to give you guys a little secret that I probably shouldn't be putting out there on the internet. There are these Goodwills called clearance centers, or some people refer to them as the bins. If you go look through my channel, there's tons of content on here that either revolves around the bins, or I go to the bins to find stuff for those projects. You need to look up Goodwill clearance centers, Goodwill bins, and see if there's not one near you. Because if there's one, even if it's a little bit of a ways away, you need to go to it and check it out. Personally, for me, I get tons of video games. It's never usually the great stuff. Every now and then I get lucky. Like the other day, I found a GameCube there, and it had a copy of Mario Sunshine in it. So, that's always great. And the cool thing about these bins is that most of them have it set up to where you pay for things by weight. And mine is $1.39 per pound. So what does a GameCube weigh? 3-4 pounds? I got it for a few bucks. I didn't pay much of anything for it. I paid way less than I would have paid for a copy of Mario Sunshine, right? So see if there's one around you. And that kind of leads to another little extra hint. If you really want to get into thrifting for video games, if you really want to get into thrifting at all, and you're in a smaller town, if you're on the smaller end of that spectrum, don't be afraid to find the next big city and often make a day out of thrifting and figure those thrift stores out. Go once a week, or go up there one day, find out when their sales day are, and maybe once a month go on their sales day. I do that when I travel. When I know I'm going somewhere else, I look up the thrift stores and try to figure out where to go and try to come home with a big duffel bag full of really cheap video games. So my last tip for video game thrifting is for those of you who want to take it to the next level. And that tip is to try to trade up what you buy at the thrift store. Maybe consider buying extra copies of stuff that you already have and or systems and trying to trade them in at local video game stores. Now, don't get too excited about this, because it is only for the people really wanting to take it to the next level, because it can be quite difficult. You can find yourself with a stack of Xboxes that no one's going to trade in, or you can find yourself with a stack of Xboxes that a trade-in store is going to give you way less than you paid for. It's a little bit hard to get into, and it takes even more familiarity with your trade-in store than you could ever have with the thrift store. You've got to know what they're looking for and why, and what they tend to give. A lot of trade-in stores will be really open with how much they're giving. My personal experience is that most trade-in stores that are mom and pop shops, they try to one-up GameStop a little bit, so their trade-in value will be 10% or something like that above GameStop. The store that I traded the most here in Phoenix, they give about 50% of what they're going to sell for it, right? So knowing that, if they're selling original Xboxes for $60 or so, I know I'm going to get one for 30. So if I find one at the Goodwill for 15 and I can spare the money and I'm turning that 15 into 30, I'll do it. That's not the ratio that I tend to like to go with. I like to buy something for $1 and trade it in for 30, right? But that doesn't happen a ton. But while I'm thrift shopping, I'm very open to that. And you should be too. If your main goal of thrift shopping is video games, be ready to try to learn to trade some stuff in. There's lots of little things that you're going to find regularly that if you don't need them, they go for quite a high price in terms of trade-in value. A good example of that would be GameCube controllers, right? You can very often, if you get lucky enough, or if you're in a big city enough that's saturated with lots of thrift stores, you're going to find the odd GameCube controller for a couple bucks, and they're going to trade in for good bit because of their popularity and, you know, Super Smash. If you're really into video games enough to want to watch a video about going thrifting for video games, you probably know all about the popularity of GameCube controllers. So just look for that. And perhaps if you're not interested in trading up, maybe you're interested in reselling, which I am completely aware there's way more money in. You're going to sell a nice Nintendo 64 for 2 to 3 times more than you're going to trade it in. But this kind of goes against my earlier point. I am a little impatient. I want to take this stuff straight to the trade-in store. I want to go home with a video game today. I don't want to wait for it to sell. So if you have more patience than I do, instead of just trading up, trade it for cash. And then you're really going to be trading up big time. Just keep those things in mind, but do be wary that when you get into that, everything's a gamble that you're going to do. It's very easy to waste money. You're very likely to waste money early on spending too much on stuff. You've got to do your research, which is probably another tip all on its own. Do your research. Watch all the popular guys on YouTube. Even if you're not entirely into what they're talking about, it's a good idea just to absorb as much information as you can, because it's really hard to keep up with what the rare games are. The last thing you want to do is go thrift shopping and walk past some copy of I don't know what, Conker's Bad Fur Day on N64, which is a pretty pricey game. You don't want to walk past those games that are expensive, even if they're not ones you're interested in. Those are going to be the ones you're going to want to trade up. If you find a video game at a thrift store that's worth a fortune and you're not interested in it, it's still worth a fortune. Go sell it, go trade it up. So do your research, learn what games are rare. Buy the games you want and keep those, sell the ones you don't, and get the other ones. Unless you're a completionist like me and you're going to keep everything you ever find. I have a problem. Doesn't mean you do. So that's it, guys. That's all the tips I can think of right now. If I think of another list of them, I'll just do an update to this video in the future. If you're super into collecting and you want to keep up with my collection, there's a link down below that you can click on and go check out what's in my collection. I keep a very, very detailed updated list. Most people aren't going to be into that kind of thing. The only reason I'd probably suggest you do so if you're starting collecting out is to just kind of see how fast the collection can grow. All this stuff you see behind me, I collected most of those games on the shelf over here. That shelf has about 300 games on it, and I've gotten all of those in a little less than a month and a half, simply because I buy them all for $1 or less, and sometimes even 50 cents a piece. And sometimes I get lucky and pay for them by weight, and then it's really, really cheap. You're talking 10, 20 cents. So check that link out, and also leave me a comment below if you found this at all helpful, or if you just want to tell me about your thrifting adventures. I'll sit here and talk about thrifting all day long. And I especially want you to comment if you sat all the way through this video and you're not into video games, but you found it interesting in terms of thrifting. Please talk to me about thrifting. Give me your attention. But until next time, guys, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so that next time I do post a video, you can get a notification and come back then and hang out with me. But guys, until then, peace out.
Hey, I'm a shark with a top hat, and I think you should subscribe. Go ahead, hit the button. I'll wait. Okay, bye.